The Lib Dems always tell us that they're very green.
Indeed. We've got to be very clear on this issue. I agree with what Davina said. We've been saying it this week, that retrospective taxes are unfair, but we do have to encourage people into smaller cars. What we would do as a party, and we've said this for some time, is we'd abolish vehicle excise duty. That would mean that most people would be better off. We have to look at smarter ways of taxing. This comes back to the whole issue of the council tax and the way in which we're not targeting taxes properly. We're punishing poorer people. We're not giving them value for money in transport. So we abolish that duty. We look at other ways to introduce funding for transport and give people a fairer deal for the money they're paying.
But ultimately, we do need to get people out of their cars, don't they?
Where possible. We have to realise that, some people need
where
cars.
Where possible, so if people aren't bothered, then
well, no, I think it's about what Davina said. It's about moving from bigger cars to smaller cars. I think it's about moving from 2 cars to 1 car. We're not dictating to people they shouldn't have cars. We realise that families need cars. I use a car, and you probably use a car too, Gary. But we have to be sensible about our transport policy, and we have to be sensible about limiting the amount of pollution. So we want to do this gradually, with a clear and honest way that people can understand what they're going to pay. And as you've pointed out, if they can afford it, they'll pay it. And if they can't, they'll make that decision consciously.
Margaret Curran, you've made a big play of the fact that you will speak to the Chancellor if you're elected.
Yes, I will.
So what are you going to say to him?
Well, one of the key points I wanted to make in that is it's very important you don't just do things in a by-election as part of a campaign, but it's part of a sustained style, if you like, and how you continue to represent people and do politics.
So you stick to the policies that you've previously advocated?
Yes,
then,
absolutely.
In that case.
Yes.
No, but I'm talking about the Chancellor here.
No, but what I would want the Chancellor...
There's talk of him going back on this.
One of the key points of my campaign, Gary, has been that in the past, when we've gone through economically turbulent times, the East End of Glasgow has paid far too harsh and disproportionate price under the governments of other people. But this time, when we're living in economic turbulence, I think it's vitally important we protect the East End of Glasgow, and that's one of the key things I would want to do. So what I want to do is to get Alistair Darling to meet with people, not in a campaign stunt, not with media watching, but so people can... taxi drivers. I met a woman the other day in Parkhead, I think, who was telling me about how she's suffering with her family. I think we really need to understand the experience of people.
So the Chancellor doesn't understand at the moment.
Exactly. Gary,
why haven't you picked
that's
up the
not
phone?
fair.
Have you spoken to him yet?
Gary, that's not fair. What I'm saying is, when I think you're in a certain area, hearing directly the immediate experience of people, I think that's very important that you actually do.
I just want to get an answer to this. Firstly, have you spoken to the Chancellor? And secondly, should he reduce this vehicle excise duty?
Well, I think he should reduce the vehicle excise duty, and I haven't spoken to him, but I will speak to him.
I will speak to
him in a sustained basis, simply, not just during a campaign.
Why haven't you invited the Chancellor, which you're very good friends with, before this by-election campaign? You've been an MSP for
I'm happy for him to come to
Why is it suddenly now that the Chancellor, who we presume, and Alistair Darling don't understand the issues because you have to explain them to them? I think that's ridiculous. But why are you saying you'll invite him down now when you've had all the opportunities as an elected member to do that previously?
Probably in Edinburgh.
It's a by-election promise, and I think we should treat it as such.
No, I don't. Well, I think Alistair Darling's very welcome to come to the constituency at any other point. But my point is that at this particular period, there's been a shift in economic circumstances. I mean, I meet Alistair Darling many times, and he's very welcome in the constituency. But I think what we've got to appreciate is the immediate shift. There has been a downturn in recent weeks, particularly, and I think it's vitally does that. So I don't think it's fair to be attacked on that basis.
But surely we should have both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor coming here to listen.
I can campaign on my own. I'm proud of my own record. I don't need
Alex. We'll leave that one.
I think that's...
Just a brief point.
A brief point is that Margaret harks back. When I'm on the doorsteps meeting people, they're actually saying, well, we welcome the by-election because it's the first time in years that somebody's actually knocked on our door and asked what matters to us. And Labour's been in control for the best part of 60 years in Glasgow. Correct. And Margaret was part of the Labour Lib Dem administration in Edinburgh for 8 years of the past 9 years.
Absolutely.
So to suddenly say, previous governments, what happened in the distant past...
The Tories are still remembered, Davina. People still remember the Tories.
Unrepresentative of what's been said on the street. What they're saying is, I go into the shop, it costs me more. I go to the petrol station, it costs me more. We're bringing forward positive solutions. We've already talked about the fuel price regulator, which could take 5 pence off a litre of petrol if introduced today. Alistair Darling should have been up in the past. He should come up now. Why wait until after the by-election?
What about a windfall tax, for instance? Would you support something like that?
Gary, can I make one point? Which is a few people have contradicted me in this and have raised points directly to me. It's only fair I get to answer them. One of the big things about the East End of Glasgow is it's been entirely misrepresented. There is great progress in the East End of Glasgow and there is significant prosperity. Yes, there are challenges, and the challenge of poverty is one that is the centre of my political life. But let us not misrepresent the East End of Glasgow and recognise the progress that's been...
Let's get back to the issue, which is the question I've just asked you here about a windfall tax. We've changed economic circumstances. Is it time to think about taxing a different way, maybe back to the way that Labour did when it first came to power, and actually asking companies and utilities and others to pay more?
Yes, well, I would never rule that out if I thought that was the right thing to do in the economic circumstances. But what is vitally important is you look at those circumstances in the round. And what I do fundamentally disagree with is the premise in the SNP that somehow if the money goes to the Treasury, it is therefore not spent in Scotland.
So Scotland should get a slice of any windfall tax?
Well, Treasury resources are vitally important, particularly in the East End of Glasgow, where through the benefit system it's very important. So I wouldn't agree with that premise. And we do know that when you raise revenue in one tax strand, that creates pressures on others. So I just think we need to get away from some of the superficial, crude debates that we have about tax and windfalls and actually begin to make sure that we have the levers that create regeneration and prosperity and jobs in the East End of Glasgow. They're cutting apprenticeships throughout Scotland. That has a major impact.
Well,
they need to talk about that a bit.
You were nodding the idea of a windfall tax, Jeremy.
Yes, we're hearing a lot of...
Who would be taxed?
Well, for starters, we're hearing a lot of general words from Margaret Curran and from Labour, but nothing very specific.
Well, let's have some
now,
specifics.
The specific things is that I think the Tories stole our policy about the fuel tax
first time you share
regulator. But I mean, some of the things that the Labour government are doing and have been doing, like the 10p tax rate going up to 20p, that hurts local people. That's not on. The same with her support for, we've already talked about council tax, when that's hurting local people. The SNP government is trying to help small people, ordinary people in the East End, like small businesses, for example, abolishing the business rates over the next few years.
That's by the Tories bringing it forward.
That's a huge step forward. And clearly, we will work with any party in the Scottish Government that is for the benefit of the Scottish people.
But what about the idea of a windfall tax?
I'm certainly open to these kind of things. And I think that the main point I would make on that is, do we want another Labour MP going down to Westminster and just being part of the establishment? Or do we want somebody who's going to go down there and challenge them? Because if we send a Labour MP down again, Gordon Brown is just going to carry on like he has been. If we send an SNP MP down there, people are going to wake up.
No, I think
it's time for, as the SNP says, it's time for a bigger slice of money to come to Scotland.
Well, this is one issue that we could discuss. We've discussed many issues. John's raised a good point here. Why do we send a Labour MP?
No. John may well have raised that point, but that's not the question I've asked you.
Well, yes,
should Scotland have a bigger slice of the economic
cake?
There's
a report came out quite recently saying that Scotland is actually getting too much money, and we have to look into which report is correct. Now, there are many, and it's like all the debates we've had, there are evidence suggesting one thing and another. It's an issue which has to be looked at.
So if the report that says Scotland's getting too much is correct, then you would advocate what?
Well, I think we have to look at the reports. What I'm saying here, Gary, is that there are conflicting reports, and it's a very detailed issue. What's important to people on the doorstep is what we should be talking about in this debate. Now, John's made a very good point. Why are we sending down a Labour MP who will be part-time, as she's clearly admitted in her own campaign, in 1 second, Margaret, who's going to be part-time, and he says that he can do a better job as an SNP MP. I would argue quite clearly that as a very, very single-issue politician, focused party and independence, that will not be John's priority if he's elected as the MP. And quite simply, what we need in this constituency, and I don't need a lecture on the East End of Margaret because I've come from the constituency, is somebody who's local, somebody who knows the issues, and is unperturbed by such issues as independence.
So back to the issue that I asked you to address, which is about the amount of money that Scotland gets.
Yes.
And you're advocating a review of the Barnett formula. Ultimately, that's,
we believe
that's to lead to a reduction in the money that Scotland gets from central government.
Not at all. We believe that the Scottish Parliament should be given more powers. We believe that there's a greater deal of fiscal autonomy needed, and I think that would raise money for the Scottish Parliament. It gives them more autonomy, it allows us to have a better dialogue with Westminster, and ultimately we're making things happen for the Scottish people. We're not arguing with Westminster, and we're not doing nothing about the problem.
OK, let's move on to something else. Davina Rankin, should a politician ever have 2 jobs?
I would leave that to Alex Salmond and Margaret Curran to defend, but if I was elected as an MP, I'd be a full-time MP at Westminster, joining my colleagues in the benches who are likely to form the next government.
So a politician should never have 2 jobs?
A politician should put the people of their constituents first, focus on issues that matter to them, i.e. cost of living, crime, rising cost of fuel, and do that on a full-time basis.
And that would apply, obviously, to those MPs already who have directorships, etc., and work for private companies?
I think the main focus should always be the constituents, as I've already said. As I said, as I started, it's down to Margaret to defend her choice to maintain her role as an MSP, as an MP. I think it's down to Alex Salmond to defend his choice of maintaining a role as an MP, an MSP and leader of a minority administration. They can speak for themselves. I'm more focused on what the people of Glasgow East want, and they want someone who will work full-time, work hard for them and stand up and speak on their behalf.